Welcome to the Texas Citizen Journal, an island of reason in the sea of political insanity. And now your host, Reagan Reed.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Texas Citizen Journal show, brought to you by the Texas Citizen Journal, the finest conservative publication in this part of Texas. And of course, Montgomery County's premier local news station, mcplive.tv. I am your fearless host, Reagan Reed, and wow, we have a pretty crazy show lined up today. A lot of news developments happening this week that I can't wait to just get into and digest and talk about the implications with you. And so let's get started with that. But first, just housekeeping. I want to remind everybody, be sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video wherever you may be watching it, share it with your friends. And again, let me know your thoughts about all these things in the comments. I do read those. And so I do appreciate your feedback. Before we get into the news, though, I did want to just acknowledge that the longtime chair of the Montgomery County Republican Party, Dr. Wally Wilkerson, passed away this week at the age of 91. And so he was the Republican Party chairman for Montgomery County for 56 years. Absolutely incredible. Longest serving party chair in Texas history and probably U.S. history, as far as I know. I mean, he pretty much founded the Republican Party here and was instrumental in turning Texas red. And wow, the stories that man could tell. As former President Trump said at the rally this January, that man's a dynamo. And he was a dynamo. And no secret to anybody who has followed Montgomery County politics that Dr. Wally and I had, let's say, a complicated relationship. Many years of, between us, but I'm not going to get into that today, although I do, I've a lot of thoughts going through my head since I heard the news, and I have a lot of things to say, but I don't want to say it right now, and so I will postpone that for another show. Get into that later. Really, all I want to say now is that I do wish that we'd had a better relationship, but at the end of the day, I'm thankful that I even got to meet such a legend as Wally Wilkerson. I mean, this guy, and he really was, he was a legend. And so just the fact that I got to meet him before he left this earth, I think is pretty incredible, and it is something that I'll always remember. And if you just look back over the course of his life, I think any of us would be lucky if we could live such a long and successful life doing what we love as he did. And so he will definitely be missed, but I'm glad that he has been reunited with his wife of many years. And so definitely my prayers are with his family and friends at this time. So let's get into the news. I would be remiss if I started the show with anything else other than the opinion that has been leaked from the Supreme Court, apparently showing that there is a majority of the court now that is willing to overturn Roe v. Wade. And this is something I've talked about on this show before, but really what an incredible leak. And so this, of course, unless you've been living under a rock, you've seen this news all over the place. So first of all, I want to kind of address the leak and the leaker. This is absolutely unprecedented. I have done some research and I can't find anywhere where somebody has leaked this out. My understanding is it's probably a clerk and whoever that is, they need to, sniff them out and, punish them to the maximum extent of the law, because I think that by leaking this out, that causes pretty severe damage to the institution and its reputation. And so there's been a lot of speculation as who it is and what could have motivated them to do this. There's some people that say, well, it was a left-wing clerk, maybe one of Sotomayor's clerks that leaked this out in order to put pressure on the court to not adopt this decision. But honestly, I could see this also being a right-wing clerk, and that maybe if you had one of the justices, that initially in February you had the 5 votes in favor of the opinion, but maybe one of the justices was kind of wavering or kind of wobbly, and I could see like a conservative clerk leaking this out to try to cement the decision and keep anybody from wavering at the last minute, like Kennedy did during the Casey v. Planned Parenthood case. So, it'll be interesting to see who the leaker turns out to be if we ever find out. But whoever it is, I think, I'm not sure what the maximum punishment would be, but they need to get it. So this is incredible if Roe is indeed overturned. This is something that I have hoped for, prayed for my entire life. And I think not only is it great for all of the unborn, obviously, but I think it will be a great thing for the country and for our political system. The fact is, the courts never should have become this politicized as they are. Supreme Court fights should not be these knockdown, drag-out fights. If you look at past justices, pretty much most of them were confirmed almost unanimously, even when the president was of another party. And really, I think that Roe v. Wade was a big reason why the courts have become so politicized, because you had under the Warren and the Burger courts, these judges were legislating from the bench. They were acting like a super Congress and not like judges that are just supposed to interpret the law. And so, a lot of people are bemoaning like, oh, this is going to be some earthquake if Roe is overturned. And so here's the way I see it. I think that it's going to be kind of like ripping a Band-Aid off of an open wound. Okay, so you've got the wound, it's kind of festering, and you're trying to put like a Band-Aid over it. It's not really healing it. And so if you rip it off, there's going to be like short-term, pain or whatever, but in the long run, it'll be better. And so I think that in the short term of Roe v. Wade being unturned, it's really going to turn up the heat on the culture wars and the political polarization and just the craziness in general. You're already seeing all kinds of apocalyptic rhetoric and hysteria going on right now. But I think in the long term, this may actually have the possibility to turn down the temperature a little bit, because if Roe v. Wade is overturned, it's not going to make abortion illegal at the federal level. What it's going to do is turn this down to the states. And so it will go back to the democratic process, and each state will get to vote on it and make their own decisions. And so in the long run, I think that taking this out of the hands of the courts will be much, much better for our political system as a whole. And so if you want abortions on demand up until, 9 months of pregnancy, then you'll move to California or whatever. And if you want to live in a place that respects the dignity and sanctity of human life, then move to Texas, and you'll kind of have even more sorting. And that is the way it was intended to be. You're not supposed to have these major issues basically circumventing the democratic process and dictated to us by unelected judges. It should be decided by the people and their elected representatives in the states, in the legislatures. And so I think this is going to be healthy for our political process. And honestly, I think that the end result is that America's abortion laws will end up looking more like those of Europe. And, a lot of people don't know this. They think of Europe as being some like really liberal place, but actually our abortion laws are really an outlier when it comes to abortion laws around the world. Gonna stop it there for the train? Okay.
I didn't even hear it.
Yeah. All right, just give me the signal. So I have a map, or not really a map, but a kind of a diagram that will show you how extreme our abortion laws really are in this country. And so actually there are only a handful of countries in the world where you can kill an unborn child after 5 months of pregnancy. And as you'll see on the list, we're in the fine company of noted respecters of human rights, North Korea and China. And of course, you've got like the Netherlands where anything goes. And so, yeah, we are really, really outliers. Most of Europe, it is legal in the very early stages of pregnancy, and it kind of varies from country to country, but almost nowhere is it legal once you get to those later stages of pregnancy. And so I think you're probably going to end up with kind of a patchwork state to state in the United States. Some states like Texas, I suppose, will ban it completely, except for the life of the mother. And some states like California will probably, I don't know, they're probably going to try to push the limits and kill babies after they're born. I don't know. And then a lot of states are probably just going to fall somewhere in between where, maybe it's legal at the first trimester and not in the third. And so it's going to, like I said, I think it'll be more of like a patchwork, just kind of like Europe, but it will be the people going to their legislatures and working this out in the legislative process, not some one size fits all dictated by the court. And so I think that'll be a very good thing for the country. And again, I think there's going to be a lot of hysteria, and it's going to turn up the heat in the culture wars in the short term, but in the long term, it may actually diffuse it a little bit by pushing this decision down to the states. So kind of in that vein, there's a lot of people that are saying, well, this is going to hurt Republicans in November in the midterms, and the Democrats should make an issue of this, and this may save them. And I don't see it. I really don't. I think that for most people, if abortion is their most important, if keeping abortion legal is their most important issue, I don't think those people are voting Republican anyways. I think those people have already sorted themselves into the Democrat Party. And so I just don't see the issue really helping or hurting either side that much, because just as it may galvanize pro-abortion people, it's also going to galvanize pro-life people. And so it probably kind of cancels themselves out. The only area where I think this decision may help the Democrats is when it comes to fundraising, because this issue is a pretty big fundraiser, and so I think it could help them there. But other than that, I don't see it. I think that at this point the economy is just so bad, with inflation running rampant. I think that voters are going to be much more concerned about kind of these table issues like inflation and what's going on in schools and also just the rise in crime. And I don't think anything can really save the Democrats from that tide that's coming against them at this point. And I think it's going to put on display some of the extremism of the pro-abortion movement. And I think you have people already, a lot of these Democrat candidates, even in these swing states like Tim Ryan in Ohio, and we'll get to the Ohio race here in a minute. But they're saying, they're already supporting, saying abortion needs to be legal nationwide up until birth, all through all 9 months of pregnancy. And so, look, I don't think that the majority of the country is necessarily where I am on the abortion issue. My position is that it should be completely illegal except to save the life of the mother, if it's absolutely necessary to save the mother's life. I don't think the majority of the country necessarily is where I'm at, but I definitely don't think that the majority of the country favors killing babies, when they're 9 months old in the womb, right up until birth. And so it's very much an extreme position. And so if the Democrats are going to run in the midterms on, abortion up until birth, I don't see how that's a winning strategy for them. The last thing I really want to say on this whole topic is that I just want to acknowledge the person who perhaps is the most responsible of anyone for this great decision, and that would be none other than the old crow himself, Cocaine Mitch. What a based guy, what a legend. If you look, had it not been for McConnell holding up Merrick Garland and when Scalia's seat came open, and McConnell really made a gamble and decided to hold that seat open. And as a result, we got Gorsuch. And then when all the pressure was put on Kavanaugh and he was smeared with all those false accusations, and McConnell could have cut his losses and gone with someone else, but nope, he stuck with it and got Kavanaugh through. And then again, towards the end, he got Amy Coney Barrett in. And so really, if you look at it, there's nobody who's had more of an impact on our judiciary than old Mitch McConnell. And so he should be the hero of babies everywhere, because he's responsible for this. And also the Federalist Society. In my opinion, all the conservative movements need to be looking to the Federalist Society and what they've done over the last few decades, because I think the conservative legal movement and the Federalist Society is probably the greatest success story anywhere in the conservative movement. The way that they have, systematically, they've played the long game, and they've really done a great job and made originalism the mainstream now in legal thought, and really, made that very, kind of put that intellectual, side on all of this. And so the Federalist Society, wow, we really need to look at what they've been doing and copy them. So with that, we are going to go to a quick break. And when we get back, I'm going to get into a little bit of a very important Senate race that happened in Ohio. And you may be wondering, what does Ohio have to do with me? Well, stay tuned, because it's very important, and we'll talk about it after the break.
Hello, and welcome to MCPLive.tv. I'm Bill Brenza, and along with Billy Graff, we own and operate MCPLive.tv. Now, we do this as a service to the people of Montgomery County, but like everybody else, we need funding to be able to produce better shows and more shows for you, our viewers. The way we have done that is we have set up an account with Patreon. Patreon is spelled Patreon, so it's www.patreon.com/MCPLiveTV. If you go on there, you can make a donation to us on a monthly basis. These continuing donations will allow us to improve the content and the number of shows that we're providing to you. You can become a subscriber for as little as $3 per month. So please go ahead and log on to patreon.com and become a subscriber of mcplive.tv.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Texas Citizen Journal show. So before the break, I promised we would get into some election analysis. So we're going to get into some of the punditry right now of a very important primary contest that was held, and that was the one in the state of Ohio. They have an open Senate seat with the retirement of Rob Portman. He did not run for another term, and so it was really kind of a free-for-all. And the rules of Ohio are interesting because they don't have runoffs there, and so it's basically whoever just gets the most votes can win. So if you have a lot of candidates, even if somebody gets 20%, if you've got 10 candidates, somebody could actually win with only 20% of the vote. It's pretty incredible. And so, man, you had a free-for-all in this Senate primary, and the one that prevailed was this guy named J.D. Vance. And so a lot of you may know about him because he was a best-selling author of this book, Hillbilly Elegy. And it was actually made into a movie by Ronnie Howard. And so J.D. Vance, he's been kind of a celebrity for some time. And he was actually the one who, in the end, there was a lot of candidates that were trying to be very Trumpy, and all went down there to Mar-a-Lago to beg for Trump's endorsement. But in the end, J.D. Vance was the one who got it, which was actually pretty interesting because Vance had been very critical of Trump in the past, and was actually never Trump guy, even up until very recently. But apparently kind of did a whole makeover and was able to get Trump's endorsement and got a ton of money from Peter Thiel, a tech wizard billionaire. And so it looked like Vance had kind of been a little kind of faltering in the polls. A lot of candidates were neck and neck, but it really does seem like that Trump endorsement down in the final stretch gave Vance a boost of a couple points and enabled him to prevail in this runoff. And so Vance in the end got around 32% of the vote. And then you had the two second place finishers, Josh Mandel, their state treasurer, it's who Ted Cruz supported, and then Matt Dolan, who's part owner of the Cleveland Guardians. And so they both came in roughly tied for second place in the low 20s. And so it's really interesting. I think people kind of all across the board are overhyping this and drawing too many conclusions from it. So it's not like Vance really blew it out of the water. He didn't win in a landslide. So people are talking about, well, how much is the Trump endorsement worth in the primary? And so, if Vance got around 30% of the vote, that means about almost 20% of the Republican primary voters did not vote for the Trump endorsed candidate. But I think we have pretty good data to say it did help Vance and probably did get him the nomination because he was polling neck and neck with the others, and the Trump endorsement gave him a bump of a few points there at the end. And so that bump that he got from the Trump endorsement at just the right time was enough to put him over the edge in a state like Ohio, where you don't have to get 50%. There's no runoffs. And so Vance, let's just say he's going to be an interesting senator, and I think he will win the general election. Ohio has been trending Republican. And so Vance is one of these, what they call a national conservative. And so and I've talked about this before, on economic issues, they really do sound a lot like Bernie Sanders. They are for much bigger government, and they are in favor of a lot of government programs for the working class. But on the social issues, they're very conservative, and that's what would differentiate them from a Bernie Sanders type. So it's a very interesting view. And I mean, this kind of wing of the conservative movement has been around for a while. Pat Buchanan, back in the 90s was a good example of kind of what these national conservatives believe. And so J.D. Vance has been one of the most articulate advocates of this particular philosophy. And so he is not your typical run-of-the-mill Republican, straight down the line Republican on all the issues. He's going to bring a different ideological bent to the Senate. And so I do not subscribe to what the national conservatives believe. I am a Ronald Reagan, Barry Goldwater, William F. Buckley kind of traditional conservative Republican. But I do think it will be interesting to have Vance in the Senate because unlike a lot of politicians, I do think that Vance is a serious ideas guy. And so, he says a lot of crazy things, but he's not just the talking points. I mean, he's an author. He is a pretty substantive policy guy. And so I'm just looking forward to seeing some of the ideas he'll bring up in the Senate, because even if I don't agree with them, I do think that we need to be having these debates. And if we have kind of that diversity of viewpoints within the conservative movement and people like Vance bringing a different perspective, even if I don't agree with it, I think that can be helpful. And so, we have all these politicians kind of just saying the same thing, that won't be J.D. Vance. And so I wasn't pulling for him. I hoped he wouldn't win the primary, but he won. And so, look, I think he's going to be an interesting senator, and I don't know. We'll see how he goes. The last thing that I wanted to talk about, we have coming up here on May 7th, a lot of local elections, and so I just want to remind everybody to be sure and go out and vote. So if you're anywhere in the state of Texas, you can vote in the constitutional amendment elections. We got a couple of constitutional amendment propositions related to lowering property, or I shouldn't say lowering, property tax relief, let's say, in some form or another. And so be sure to go out and vote on those. And then here in Montgomery County, we have for Willis ISD and Montgomery ISD, both have, really massive bonds with a lot of unnecessary waste in those bonds. And both of those would raise taxes. And so if you think that your property taxes are too high, and you live in one of those school districts, you need to be sure to go out there and vote against those bonds. Because if you keep voting for these school bonds, you have no right to complain about how high your property taxes are, because you're raising them by voting for these bonds. And I just think with the economy as it is, look, I understand districts grow, you have to build buildings, and you have to use bonds for building those buildings, but why are we, spending all this money on new playground equipment and a natatorium and all this stuff right now? Really, with the economy like it is, everybody else is having to tighten their belts. The school districts should have to tighten their belts as well. And so I'd encourage people to go out and vote in those bond elections if you don't want to see your property taxes go up. Then finally, there's a lot of elections for MUDs and that sort of thing, so research those. But finally, we have the Conroe City Council. And so the biggest issue, in my opinion, is the water. And so you kind of have a slate of candidates that's really been pushing back against the San Jacinto River Authority and their attempts to raise the rates, and really wants the lawsuit to continue. So that would be Harry Hardman in position 3, Howard Wood in position 4, and Marsha Porter in position 5. And so then they're kind of running as a slate. And then you have the candidates who are more aligned with the mayor, Jody Tchaikovsky. And I'd say the mayor's candidates, they're more like, they're not necessarily pro-S. Jerry either, but they're more in the line of, pro-developer, and maybe more willing to spend taxpayer dollars in the form of incentives for businesses and that sort of thing. And so those would be Susan Johnson, in 5, Raymond McDonald, the mayor pro tem, in 4, and then there's a whole bunch of candidates in 3. And so if you live in the city of Conroe, people pay so much attention to the national politics, but all politics really is local. And these local city elections will have way more of an impact on your life than anything that comes out of DC. And then also with the county seat elections, you have a bunch of people running for municipal judge. So do your homework, go out and vote. You have until May 7th, and make your voice heard and actually have a say in how your local government is run. So if you're just sitting here listening to me talk, doesn't really do you any good. Maybe it's entertaining from time to time, but at the end of the day, you need to go out there and take initiative yourself. And so I would encourage everyone to get involved, go vote, and of course, like, comment, share. Appreciate you watching. We'll see you next time.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the position of the management and ownership of MCP.TV.